In the middle of an emergency meeting at half midnight, CEO Naomi Ellington was seconds away from signing a billion-dollar contract when single-father janitor Malik Carter accidentally knocked water onto her laptop. Everyone froze. The screen went dark with a sharp hiss, then flickered back to life, revealing something no one expected: a strange window displaying email screenshots, proprietary blueprints, and backup logs secretly uploading to Halcyon servers. Naomi whipped around, ready to fire Malik on the spot. But he looked her straight in the eye and said, "Now do you see why I had to do that?" If Malik hadn't spilled that water, the entire technology would have been stolen. But who was he really? And how did he know about the attack before anyone else? Ellington Tower rose 42 stories above Chicago's skyline, its glass facade catching the city lights like frozen rain. On the 42nd floor, the boardroom was all steel and transparency, designed to make executives feel powerful and exposed at the same time. 18 floors below, the security operations suite hummed with servers and monitoring screens. And 2 levels beneath the lobby sat the utility rooms where maintenance workers kept the building's arteries flowing. A world most employees never saw. Etherian Systems was preparing to finalize a contract for Project Niad, a revolutionary smart water sensor chip that could detect contaminants in real time and transmit data through the water itself. The technology was worth billions. It was also a target. Naomi Ellington hadn't slept properly in 3 days. At 34, she was the youngest black woman CEO in Etherian's history, and the board never let her forget it. Chief Financial Officer Graham Voss had been breathing down her neck all week, insisting they close the Halcyon deal immediately. 2 years ago, a smaller project had leaked before launch, and she'd never figured out how. Since then, she'd become meticulous, paranoid even, double-checking every access log herself. She wore her mother's ring on her right hand, a thin silver band that reminded her of one piece of advice: trust the right people, not just the powerful ones. Tonight, she wore a red V-neck bodycon dress under a charcoal blazer, her natural hair styled in elegant twists that framed her deep brown face. She kept blueprint drafts in an encrypted vault, accessible only through biometric authentication and her personal password. She thought it was secure. She was about to learn otherwise. Malik Carter pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the 42nd floor, the wheels squeaking softly. At 36, he'd been working the night shift as a janitor for 3 years. Most people saw the uniform and stopped looking. They didn't see the man who used to be a network security engineer, who'd once designed intrusion detection systems for a major tech firm before everything fell apart. 4 years ago, Malik had been framed by a colleague who'd stolen his credentials to cover up a security breach. He had evidence that could have cleared his name, but using it would have meant dragging himself and his 8-year-old daughter Zaria through a year-long legal battle. He'd walked away, taken the blame silently, and found work that let him be home when Zaria got off the school bus. Janitor work. Simple, honest, invisible. But Malik hadn't stopped being an engineer. He noticed things. He saw when network cables were improperly shielded, when access card readers logged failed attempts at odd hours. He carried a multi-tool keyring that could open most mechanical locks in the building, and a USB drive containing checksum verification tools that worked offline. He'd learned the hard way to never trust a network he didn't control. His daughter Zaria was brilliant in the way only 8-year-olds can be, seeing connections adults miss. She loved robotics and water science, filling their South Side apartment with sketches of machines that turned water droplets into signal carriers. One drawing showed a single drop of water splitting light into a rainbow of data streams. Malik had pinned it to their refrigerator. He didn't know yet that it was a blueprint for the very thing Etherion was trying to protect. Elliot Crane was Naomi's executive assistant, and he was very good at his job. Too good. At 32, he had the kind of face that made people trust him instantly. Smooth brown skin, earnest dark eyes. He was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, always ready with a solution when deadlines tightened. In his wallet, he carried 2 building access cards. One was his official employee badge. The other was marked Visitor / Contractor and had been issued 6 months ago for a vendor who'd long since completed their work. Elliot had kept it. No one had noticed. That second card had opened the vault room door 3 times in the past week, always after midnight, always when the cameras were on their maintenance loop. Miles Okafor ran the IT department with an engineer's precision and a teacher's patience. The Nigerian-born tech lead believed in process, in documentation, in making sure every system change was logged and reviewed. Lately, he'd been losing arguments. Elliot's urgent requests kept getting approved by executives who didn't want to be blamed for missing deadlines. Tessa Monroe handled public relations with calculating efficiency. Rachel Duvall, the chief legal counsel, had the same philosophy. Both black women had been warning Naomi for weeks that signing the Halcyon deal before completing the security audit was reckless. But Graham Voss had the board's ear, and the board wanted quarterly numbers that made shareholders happy. The emergency meeting on the 42nd floor had been going for 2 hours when Malik's card appeared in the hallway outside the boardroom. Through the glass walls, he could see Naomi, Graham, Elliot, and Miles gathered around the conference table. The Halcyon Memorandum of Understanding sat in the center, waiting for a signature. Malik was mopping the corridor when he heard Naomi's voice rise sharply, warning someone about water on the floor. He looked up and saw her glaring at him through the glass. He nodded apologetically and moved his cart farther down the hall, but kept his mop bucket close to the door. His positioning wasn't accidental. For 3 nights, he'd noticed something wrong with the wireless access point near the boardroom. The activity light had been blinking in patterns that didn't match normal traffic. Earlier tonight, he'd found fresh cable runs that weren't in any maintenance logs. Someone had installed a secondary network, and it was active right now. Inside the boardroom, Naomi's laptop sat open, displaying the final contract clauses. She'd set a glass of water on the table near the edge, close enough to reach when her throat got dry. Too close to the edge, as it turned out. Malik moved back toward the boardroom door, timing his approach. His cartwheel caught the door frame, jerking sideways. His hand shot out to steady it, but the motion sent his elbow into the cleaning bucket. The bucket tipped. Water sloshed out in a clear arc, through the door that someone had left slightly ajar. It hit Naomi's glass, which toppled forward, sending water cascading directly onto her open laptop. The machine hissed. The screen went black. Everyone jumped up. Naomi's face went from shock to fury in the space of a heartbeat. For 3 seconds, there was only silence and the soft dripping of water onto leather chairs. Then the laptop's BIOS screen flickered to life. A warning appeared. Secure boot. Integrity mismatch detected. The operating system loaded anyway, and when it did, a window popped up showing file transfer to a server labeled haldenlink.net. Email screenshots scrolled past. Blueprint fragments, backup logs. An upload job that had been running hidden in the background, now exposed because the sudden power loss had killed the process that kept it invisible. Naomi stared at the screen. Elliot moved immediately, suggesting they confiscate any unauthorized devices, perhaps starting with the janitor's USB drive. Clearly, this was sabotage. Graham demanded to know what was happening. Miles leaned closer to the laptop, his face draining of color as he read the file names being exfiltrated. Malik stood in the doorway, water still dripping from his mop, and met Naomi's eyes. He spoke quietly, each word deliberate. "Don't sign that contract. Someone planted a back door. Your laptop's been compromised for days." Security arrived within minutes. They escorted Malik to a small office, his keyring and USB drive confiscated. Naomi ordered Miles to run immediate diagnostics. Elliot urged her to stay on schedule, reminding everyone that delays would cost millions. Graham supported him, talking about stock prices. But something had shifted in Naomi's mind. She'd seen that progress bar. She'd seen her proprietary blueprints listed by name. And Malik Carter, the janitor she'd barely noticed in 3 years, had looked at her without fear and told her not to sign. She told Graham and Elliot to wait. Then followed Miles to the security operations suite on the 18th floor. Miles's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up forensic data. The hash values didn't match. The files stored in Naomi's encrypted vault and the files on her laptop weren't identical. Someone had modified them. The access logs showed entries outside business hours. The card ID was registered to a contractor credential that should have been deactivated months ago. Miles kept digging. He found an agent running on Naomi's machine, disguised as a touchpad driver update. It had been creating an encrypted tunnel through the guest Wi-Fi network, bypassing the corporate firewall entirely. The command and control server resolved to Haldane Link Net, the same address shown in the upload window 2 floors above. Malik sat in the holding room, thinking about his daughter and how he'd promised her he'd always do clean work, honest work. He'd kept that promise for 3 years. Tonight, he'd broken a different rule, the rule that said invisible people should stay invisible. His USB drive sat in an evidence bag on the desk. Inside was a bootable Linux environment and a checksum verification tool he'd written years ago. 3 nights ago, he'd seen Elliot entering the server room during a routine cleaning round, carrying a tablet and looking nervous. Malik had made a backup copy of certain system files before the nightly automated backup ran. It wasn't procedure, it was instinct. The door opened. Naomi walked in, followed by Miles. She'd lost the blazer somewhere, and her expression had shifted from anger to something more complex. She sat down across from Malik. "Explain." Malik told her about the wireless access point, the unauthorized cable runs, the strange traffic patterns. He told her that her laptop had been tunneling data through the guest network, that the sudden power loss from the water had killed the encryption process, exposing what was underneath. He told her that if she'd signed that contract tonight, Halcyon would have had complete copies of Project Niad's blueprints before the ink dried, and Ethereon would have lost the patent race before they knew they were in one. Naomi's hand moved unconsciously to her mother's ring. She studied Malik's face, looking for deception and finding only tired honesty. "You could have just told someone," she said. "I tried. 3 days ago, I mentioned weird network activity to a supervisor. He said, 'Janitors don't give tech advice.' Yesterday, I left a note for IT. It went unanswered. Tonight, I saw the meeting and knew I was out of time. So I made a choice. Cut the connection the only way I could." Miles had been running more checks. Now he looked up, his expression grim. He's right. The exfiltration job was nearly complete. Another 10 minutes and they'd have had everything. Naomi stood, paced to the window, looked out at Chicago's lights reflected in the glass like scattered diamonds. Her company, her responsibility, her near catastrophic mistake. She turned back to Malik. "I need you to help us fix this." "Why would you trust me?" Malik asked. Because you stopped an upload instead of starting one. Because you had 3 years to steal anything you wanted, and you spent that time fixing broken lights. She paused. Because I've spent 2 years trusting the wrong person, and maybe it's time I tried trusting the right one. She told Miles to restore Malik's access, to give him whatever he needed. This was beyond protocol now. This was triage. The next 6 hours were a controlled catastrophe. Miles's team discovered that the modified files had been accessed 17 times using Elliot's secondary badge. The timestamps matched perfectly with security logs showing late-night building access. When confronted, Elliot remained calm. He explained that Halcyon had asked for demonstration files to verify integration capabilities. It was standard vendor practice. Graham backed him up, desperate to keep the contract on track. But Malik had one more piece of evidence. From his USB drive, he produced checksum comparisons between the Vault's master files and the modified versions. The alterations weren't just copies. Someone had embedded additional metadata, microscopic changes that would have given Halcyon proof of prior invention if any patent disputes arose. It was sophisticated theft disguised as legitimate cooperation. Rachel Duvall, the legal counsel, recognized the implications immediately. If they'd signed tonight, they would have handed over not just technology, but legal ammunition for their competitors. The potential damages would have bankrupted the company. News of the breach began leaking before dawn. Someone had tipped off industry blogs. Tessa Monroe convened an emergency PR meeting. The stock market would open in 3 hours. The board demanded an explanation. Graham Voss suggested suspending Naomi temporarily to reassure investors. Half the board nodded agreement. Naomi stood in front of them all, her voice steady despite exhaustion and betrayal. She explained what had happened, accepted responsibility, then presented the evidence that proved deliberate sabotage. She announced that the Halcyon deal was suspended indefinitely pending investigation, that all external network access was being locked down, that the Niad servers were being air-gapped until they could verify clean backups. Graham tried to interrupt. Naomi cut him off. "We'll survive a stock dip. We won't survive losing our core technology and spending the next decade in litigation. The deal is dead until we're certain our house is clean." Malik suggested a trap. Something that would force the remaining conspirators into the STI open. It was risky. It required Naomi to trust him completely. She thought about her mother's ring, about trust and intuition and the cost of getting it wrong. She gave the order to proceed. While they were planning, Elliot made his own move. Realizing the investigation was closing in, he activated a wiper program designed to erase evidence from the compromised servers. But the wiper was aggressive, overwriting data at a rate that generated massive heat in the RAID array. In the server room on the 18th floor, temperature alarms began shrieking. A spark jumped from an overloaded power supply to a cable bundle. Smoke detectors should have triggered instantly. They didn't. Someone had adjusted their sensitivity threshold weeks ago, buying precious seconds of delay. By the time the fire suppression system activated, smoke was already pouring into the hallway. Naomi was in the security suite when the alarms hit. She ran toward the server room, thinking only about the backup drives that held the clean copies of Niad. The electronic locks had defaulted to secure mode, sealing the fire inside, but also trapping anyone who might be in there. She yanked on the door, but it didn't move. Malik appeared beside her with his keyring and multi-tool. Years of maintaining building infrastructure had taught him the manual overrides for every system. He popped the emergency release cover, bypassed the electronic lock, and hauled the door open. Heat and smoke billowed out. "Stay back," he ordered. But Naomi was already moving past him, heading for the backup drive cage. Sprinklers erupted overhead, drenching everything. Malik grabbed her arm, pulled her toward a specific server rack. Not the main Niad storage, which was already corrupted, but the parity drive that Miles's team kept as a last resort failsafe. Malik had noticed it during his cleaning rounds, had seen the red "Survivor" label on the chassis. They pulled the drive free, water streaming down their faces, smoke stinging their eyes. Miles appeared in the doorway, shouting for them to get out. The three of them stumbled into the hallway as the fire suppression foam deployed behind them. In the stairwell, soaked and coughing, Naomi looked at the parity drive in Malik's hands like it was the Holy Grail. Then she looked at him, at the man who just saved her life and her company's future. Something shifted in her expression, the final wall of professional distance crumbling. "Tell me what to do," she said quietly. Malik laid out the plan with methodical calm. They'd use his offline USB environment to boot a clean operating system, mount the parity drive in read-only mode, extract a time-stamped metadata timeline. They'd call in Noah Sterling from the Cyber Crime Unit to ensure everything was legally documented. They'd have Tessa stall the press. They'd have Rachel prepare injunctions against Halcyon if the evidence confirmed their complicity. And they'd set one final trap. They'd create a honeypot file labeled Niad v2 Final Integration Specs. Embed it with invisible tracking pixels that would phone home the instant someone opened it. Then grant Elliot temporary access under the guise of disaster recovery. If he took the bait, they'd have proof of active data theft with full legal standing. Naomi listened, then nodded. "Do it." While Miles worked on the technical setup, Naomi asked Malik the question that had been building in her mind. "Why are you here? Why work as a janitor when you can do this?" Malik told her about the old project, about being betrayed, about choosing his daughter over his career, about the promise he'd made to Zaria that he'd only do clean work, honest work, work that let him sleep at night. "I told my daughter I'd always do what's right, even when it's hard," he said. "She's 8. She draws pictures of water droplets carrying information. I wanted her to know me as someone who kept his promises." For the first time in 3 years, Naomi felt the weight of her mother's ring as something other than a burden. Trust the right people. She'd been trusting credentials and titles. She'd forgotten to trust instinct and integrity. That evening, she drove to Malik's apartment on the south side. A modest building with good light and a playground across the street. Zaria answered the door, wearing a t-shirt with a robot on it, her natural hair pulled into 2 puffs. Behind her, the walls were covered with sketches and diagrams. One drawing caught Naomi's eye. A single water droplet splitting into 7 streams of light, each stream carrying tiny packets of data. At the bottom, in careful crayon letters, "Water talks if you listen." "You drew this?" Naomi asked. Zaria nodded, suddenly shy. "My dad says water can carry secrets. He says everything leaves a trace." Naomi knelt down to Zaria's level. "Your dad is right. And he just saved my company by paying attention to those traces." Later, after Zaria had gone to bed, Naomi and Malik sat in the small kitchen with coffee and exhaustion. She apologized for doubting him, for nearly having him arrested, for 3 years of not seeing him at all. He accepted the apology with quiet grace, then surprised her by apologizing back, for not finding a better way to warn her. "I need you to lead the security rebuild," Naomi said. "Not as a consultant, as head of cyber resilience, full authority, full team, whatever budget you need. Water-themed security architecture. Your daughter's idea, actually. Every secret leaves a trace." Malik hesitated. He had Zaria to think about, routines that mattered. Naomi saw the conflict. Flexible schedule, remote work when needed, and a full STEM scholarship fund for Zaria, starting immediately. I need people I can trust, people who will tell me the truth even when it's inconvenient. You spent 3 years invisible, watching everything. Now I need you visible, building something that can't be broken the same way twice. The trap closed 2 days later. Elliot, believing he'd successfully misdirected suspicion, logged into the vault using his emergency credentials. He downloaded the honeypot file, transferred it to an encrypted drive, then forwarded it to an email address registered to Adrian Kelm, CEO of Halcyon Dynamics. The DNS canary triggered within 8 minutes. The tracking pixels reported their location, a server farm outside Milwaukee registered to a Halcyon subsidiary. Noah Sterling's cybercrime unit had been monitoring everything. They coordinated with the FBI's Intellectual Property Division. Warrants were executed simultaneously at Halcyon's headquarters and Elliot's apartment. The confrontation happened in Naomi's office. Elliot standing between 2 federal agents while Malik displayed the evidence on a wall-mounted screen. Transfer logs matching Elliot's devices, timestamps correlating with his building access, email metadata showing correspondence with Adrian Kelm dating back 11 months, financial records showing deposits to an offshore account. Elliot tried one final deflection, claiming Malik had fabricated the evidence. The janitors don't have the expertise to coordinate something this sophisticated. Malik responded by walking through every piece of technical proof: the hash chain verification, the TLS handshake anomalies, the timing correlation between Elliot's badge swipes and the file modification timestamps. Each explanation was precise, methodical, and completely damning. Naomi watched Elliot being escorted out in handcuffs. This man she'd trusted with her schedule, her passwords, her vulnerabilities. She felt hollowed out by the betrayal, but also strangely clear. Malik had forced her to look at what was actually happening instead of what she wanted to believe. Federal prosecutors charged Elliot with corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and wire fraud. Halcyon Dynamics faced civil litigation for receiving stolen intellectual property. Adrian Kelm resigned within a week. Rachel Duvall coordinated the legal response. Tessa Monroe managed the public narrative, transforming what could have been a catastrophic leak into a story of swift justice. The stock took a hit initially, then recovered when Ethereum announced a complete security overhaul and named Malik Carter as head of cyber resilience, a newly created executive position. Graham Voss apologized privately, admitting his pressure to close the deal had been about covering his own failures. He offered his resignation. Naomi accepted it. The board, chastened by how close they'd come to disaster, gave Naomi full authority to rebuild the security infrastructure however she saw fit. Malik's first initiative was exactly what he'd promised. Water-themed security architecture where every data flow contained traceable markers, where anomalies triggered alerts, where trust was verified continuously. He hired Miles as deputy director and brought in Noah Sterling as an external advisor. He built a team that understood security wasn't about perfect prevention. It was about knowing when you'd been compromised and responding before the damage became irreparable. 1 year later, Project Niad launched successfully, its smart water sensors revolutionizing infrastructure monitoring across 6 continents. Ethereum systems became a case study in corporate resilience, featured in business schools as an example of how to survive catastrophic betrayal and emerge stronger. The annual security conference was held in the same 42nd floor boardroom where everything had started. Malik presented the new architecture to industry leaders. Zariah, now 9, demonstrated a prototype water signal robot that could detect anomalies in fluid networks and transmit warnings through the water itself. Naomi watched from the side of the room, no longer in the red dress and armor, but in simple professional attire that suggested confidence without needing to perform it. She'd learned to trust her team, to admit uncertainty, to value competence over charisma. The company was different now. She was different. After the presentation, when the guests had left, Naomi found Malik on the rooftop terrace. Chicago stretched out below them, a galaxy of lights reflected in glass towers. "You know," Naomi said, leaning against the railing, "that night when you spilled water on my laptop, I was ready to destroy you." "I know," Malik said quietly. "I was ready to be destroyed, but not before stopping the theft. You saved everything by breaking everything." She turned to look at him. "That laptop was $8,000. The company we almost lost was worth $800 million, best return on investment we've ever had." Malik smiled slightly. "Your insurance covered the laptop. I checked." "Of course you did." She laughed. The ring on her finger caught the light. She'd been wearing it the night everything changed. Trust the right people. "My mother left me this ring. She said it would help me know who to believe." I didn't understand what she meant until I met someone who'd rather be wrong and honest than right and corrupt. The first drops of rain began to fall, light and warm, speckling the pavement with dark stars. Neither of them moved to go inside. "Sometimes," Malik said softly, "you have to cut the power to see what's really running. Water does that, stops everything, exposes everything, cleans everything." "Is that what you told Zariah?" "I told her that water carries truth, that you can't hide anything from something that flows everywhere and remembers everything." She understood it better than I did. They stood together in the rain, CEO and security chief, two black professionals who'd been strangers a year ago, now bound by crisis and reconstruction and the strange intimacy of shared survival. Below them, Chicago glittered through the rainfall like a million promises. Naomi thought about that night, about the moment everything had shattered and reassembled into something stronger. About the choice Malik had made, knowing it might cost him everything. About the choice she'd made to believe him. "You spilled water on my laptop," she said, "and saved my future." "Sometimes," Malik replied. "That's what it takes. You have to turn everything off to see what matters." The rain fell harder, washing the city clean. And somewhere below them, on the south side, a 9-year-old girl was drawing another water droplet, splitting light into data, imagining the next impossible thing that adults would eventually build. Naomi reached out and took Malik's hand. Not romantically, but in recognition. Two people who'd learned the same hard lesson from opposite directions. That power without trust is brittle. That visibility without integrity is hollow. That the right person in the right moment can change everything. They stood there until the rain eased, until the city shimmered clear again, until the water ran off the glass towers and pooled in the streets below, carrying its cargo of reflected light toward storm drains and rivers, and eventually Lake Michigan, where everything dissolved and reformed and began again. Just like trust, just like truth, just like the company they'd rebuilt together, one careful drop at a time.